Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Naruto arrogant royal prince of Konoha? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the special JONIN23 for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. It was a dark rainy night, two small figures were running under the cover of darkness. They had just ran away from their homes. One was the prince and the other the demon. All they had was the clothes they had on and a small amount of money they had scrounged up. Sasuke, are you sure you want to do this? I am sure the village would treat you like a king and offer the best training possible. The smaller of the two asked. Naruto, you are my only real friend, no my brother. I know they would treat me to the best, but I don't want that, I want to gain strength with hard work. Sasuke said as he ran next to Naruto. So where are we going, bro? Naruto stopped for a minute and pulled out a map with the elemental counties on it. We head north till we reach Sea Country. From there we will board a boat heading east. We are leaving the elemental countries and we start training in the metal country. He finished as he pulled a second map out and placed it next to the elemental map, and Sasuke saw how the both lined up perfectly, almost as if the Hokage or any cages of the elemental country did not want the citizens to know that there were other countries out there. How did you get this, Naruto? Well, you see, I was always in the Hokage's office for protection when a strange man came into his office. He was ninja, but he had a strange symbol on his headband. It looked like two swords crossing each other. Anyways, they spoke for a few hours of what I didn't know. The old man was mad at him and kicked him out as he left. I heard him say, you know, he belongs with his family is with us, we will bring him home whether you like it or not. Then he looked at me and smiled. He then dropped something next to my feet. I picked it up and went to hand it to him, but he was already gone. So I went home. I was curious about the scroll, so I tried to open it, but I couldn't, so I left it alone. That was 3 months ago. Naruto said as pick up the maps and continued walking. Well, that doesn't explain how you got a map. Sasuke said as he walked next to Naruto. Well, it happened 3 weeks ago when the whole incident happened. Naruto saw how Sasuke flinched but continued. Some of the drunk civilians came to my apartment and began to stab and beat me until they thought I was dead. Naruto had a couple of tears running down his face remembering that beating. After they left, I got up and started to leave to the old man's office when the scroll rolled next to me. A drop of blood fell on it. When it did, the scroll started to glow red before it turned blue, then opened. I think a blood seal was on it, but I don't understand why my blood opened it. Anyways, inside was a letter saying to go to Sea Country and look for a boat heading east. Then to show the captain of the boat this map. And that's how I got it. I wanted to leave earlier, but the Hokage always had someone trailing me. The trip to Sea Country was a relatively quiet one. They never ran into any trouble, which surprised them, but didn't think much of it. They were in one of the port cities of Sea Country looking for any boats that were going east. They found one that was leaving in the next 3 hours. They ran to the dock of the boat to speak with the captain. They found an old man that was going bald. He was smoking some kind of cigar. What do you want? I am very busy, he said in gruff tone. We found this scroll. It would not open until my blood fell on it. Inside was a letter and these maps. In the letter it told me to give the map to the captain whose boat was heading east. They told me you were heading that way, Naruto said as he was holding the scroll. The captain thought for a minute before he spotted the symbol on the scroll. Tell me, boy, what is your name? Naruto Uzumaki, and this is my friend Sasuke Uchiha. We are going to Metal Country to train. And he handed us the scroll with the map. The captain opened it and took a look at the map. In the right corner of the map he saw a seal. It was the seal of the royal clan of Metal. He added some charca to the seal and the map began to change. It was a hidden message. It read. To the reader of this message, if a child by the name of Naruto Uzumaki comes to you and says he is heading to Metal Country, I want you to guard him with your life. He is the son of the crown prince of Metal Minato Namikaze and the heiress of the Uzumaki clan of Konoha. Sadly, they both have gone to the next world, thus making him the new crown prince and heir of the two most powerful families in the entire world. If you agree to this mission, then you will be handsomely rewarded for your troubles. Take him and any of his guests to the port city of Vernade. Upon arrival you will hand him to his escorts and you will be paid. Thank you. First Vanguard of the Royal Guard, Mike Aspard. Fine, I will take you and your friend to Metal. I will set up your quarter. We leave as soon as you're both ready. It will take us 3 days to get there. By the way, my name is Richard Vasburen. Both Naruto and Sasuke were confused by the name. It was an unusual name in this part of the world, but decided not to look into it. We can leave as soon as possible, as I have a feeling the old man has found out we are missing and has probably sent someone to find us and return us to Konoha, Naruto said, and Sasuke nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, in Konoha days ago, the third was sitting in his office fighting the greatest enemy he had ever faced. The ever-dreaded paperwork. After what seemed like an eternal battle, he had finally vanquished his enemy for the day. He suddenly remembered that had not seen or heard his favorite blonde in almost 10 hours, which was odd, because there was always something going on when it came to his adopted grandson. He sent for his Anbu to look for him and bring him in. He suddenly remembered the meeting he had with the metal nin 3 months earlier. The nerve of them to come into his domain and demand that they give them Naruto over to them. Granted, that is where his living family was at, but Naruto also had roots in Konoha. His mother was the last of the Uzumaki clan. Though they were not from Konoha from the beginning, they had made their home here and through the years have made Konoha the village it is today. Yes, the villagers were complete idiots for the way they treated him. I mean, come one, everyone knew his last name was Uzumaki and had the backing of their long-term allies, the Uchiha clan. Hell, even the clan head wanted to adopt Naruto when his parents died, but the council refused to listen, well, the civilian side. The Shinobi Council went on record that they did not have any grudges toward him and would respect the wishes of his father and mother. Any attempts on his life would be seen as an attempt on any of them and would be dealt with accordingly, but even the threats of the major families didn't stop the harsh treatment he received. The third was brought out of his musings when an Anbu came into his office. Well, Inu, where is he? Sorry Hokage-sama, but we can't find him. We even looked in the Uchiha district, but not even Sasuke can't be found. We looked in his apartment and all his belongings were scattered across the floor. I even looked in his secret hiding spot that we created and found that all his money had been taken. The Anbu looking in the Uchiha district found Sasuke's house the same way. I also found this seal on the floor. Inu reported as he handed over the seal to the third. But after looking at the entrances, found no force entry and the seals were still intact since we put them on after the last attempt on his life. We found no evidence of a struggle. The third looked at the seal for a second and knew immediately what was going on. Recall all of the Anbu and Inu, I have a special mission for you and Nico. After you have recalled the Anbu, you will head north until you reach Sea Country. Once there you will head to the port city of Filler, head to the special dock 1293, it is in the northern part of the harbor. Once there will be one boat. It will be different than all of the rest as it will be made of metal. You have 3 days to get there as the boat already docked there, probably left by now. Let's pray that Naruto and Sasuke didn't make it in time to get on that boat. After you get in contact with the captain of the ship, tell him if anyone by the name of Naruto Uzumaki comes to him to notify you immediately. Under no circumstances he to set foot in Metal Country. If he does, we could lose him to them. Inu was confused as to why the third did not want him on that boat. Why Hokage-sama? Who do we lose him to? He asked as he received the maps to find the port city he was to go to. To his family, Inu-kun. Naruto is a very special boy. He is the crown prince to the most powerful kingdom in the world, but he also have ties in Konoha, as you already know. Sir, how can he be prince to Metal Kingdom? Wasn't Kushina-sensei married to the ambassador to Metal? I am sure he wasn't a king, as it would have put him in great danger. Inu asked. Who said anything about her married to the king? No, she was married to the ambassador, but he was also the crown prince. After his death, Naruto became the next in line for the throne, as Minato was the only son of the king. The third explained. The king has for years tried to come and claim him, but I can't let him take him. It was Kushina-chan wish for her son to be raised in the Konoha standards. She may have loved her husband, of that I am sure, but his standard for a warrior was brutal and bloody. She did not want her only son to be raised that way. The Metal Country would have tried through the council, but they even knew that if they found out he was prince to a powerful kingdom, he would have been brainwashed and when he became of age, would transferred all land and right to the kingdom over to the council. The third then pulled out his pipe and began to light it. Hell, we even tried to compromise. They would send some of their guard to protect him until he was properly trained, as you remembered 3 years ago, but that plan fell through as the council began to get suspicious of why metal nins were in the village. So it was now back to hand over Naruto to his living family. It was getting to the point to full-blown war, a war that you know we can't win, but even then I would not hand Naruto over to his grandparents. He is far too important. It was 3 months ago that a messenger nin from Metal came and told us one last time to hand him over or military action will be used. He told me Naruto will be returned to his family one way or another. I remembered him stopping next to Naruto as he was leaving and gave him a smile. I thought I saw him drop something but didn't investigate. It seemed it was a blood seal that only Naruto could open, as I sensed a Charka pulse 3 weeks ago and thought he was being kidnapped, so I had extra Anbu trailing him. I guess Naruto now knows of Metal and added the treatment he received here, decided that he could get better treatment in Metal. I am willing to guess that Sasuke found out that Naruto was leaving left with him. I see Hokage-sama, I will go immediately to Sea Country. Inu bowed and was about to leave. Wait. The third said, making Inu stop. If Naruto did reach the boat, you are to return immediately. Do not go after him, as it would be an act of war. The third just sighed. Pray that if Naruto does make it to Metal, he doesn't forget about Konoha and one day could forgive its citizens. If he does make it, then and only then will his heritage be known and the up they caused. Also I hope once they find out about the treatment that Naruto has went through they don't come and destroy the village. After recalling the Anbu, Kakashi and Nico headed out to see country, hoping that they were not too late. They ran all through the night and most of the day only resting for an hour at a time. They managed to make it in 2. They quickly went to the special dock used by Metal Country just as they saw a boat leave port. As they ran deeper into the port they ran into the port master. "Excuse me, have you seen these two?" Kakashi asked as he handed the port master a picture of Naruto and Sasuke. "Oh yes, they just left in that boat," he replied as he pointed at the boat in the distance. Kakashi only sighed as he saw the boat leave. "Oh Naruto, I hope you can forgive Konoha for what they did. And he turned and went back to Konoha to tell the third the bad news. Meanwhile back on the boat Naruto along with Sasuke were in the room that the captain had made for them. They could sum it up to one word: wow. The room was set up for someone of royalty. Naturally Naruto thought it was because of Sasuke, but later found out it was for him, as the crew called him Young Prince and Lord Naruto, which confused him. They had just left port when he walked to the rear of the ship and he saw a man with a mask on talking to another man. The man pointed at the ship, the masked man looked in the direction of the boat, and Naruto thought for a second that the man was looking straight at him. Then the port got smaller and smaller until he couldn't see it. Naruto then began to walk back to the mess hall to get something to eat. As he made his way he met up with Sasuke who looked a little green. "Sup Sasuke, you feeling alright?" he asked concerned for his friend. "I'll be fine, just a little seasickness, but the crew already gave me something for it. I will be fine in a little while. I already feel it working." "So where are you going?" "Just going to get something to eat." "You want to come with?" Naruto asked as he began to walk again. "Not hungry right now. I think I am going to lie down for a will it tell me, do you know how long this trip is going to be?" Sasuke asked as he walked next to him as the room was in the same direction. "Well, the captain said it will be 3 days before we reach Metal. He told me that this boat is the fastest in all of the sea," Naruto said as he left Sasuke back in the room. 3 days later. Naruto and Sasuke were in front of the ship, looking at the port city of Vernade came closer and closer into focus. They were awed at the sheer size of the city, it was huge. As the ship came into dock Naruto and Sasuke quickly got off the boat and went to look around, of course with some of the crew as bodyguards. They walked down the street looking at the different stalls and all the weird things they sold. As they walked they didn't notice a group of people beginning to follow them. Naruto and Sasuke soon found themselves lost in the crowded marketplace. Their bodyguards soon realized that they were missing and began to look for them while cursing the whole time. While with the boys they were frightened as they did not know the area and being 7 at the time was a bad thing. Naruto, being a little used to being in hostile situations, said that the best thing to do is go back to a place they knew, which was the dock, so they turned around and began to backtrack. As they walked they noticed that they were being followed but couldn't see who. As they turned into an alley to get to the next street over they surrounded by 4 adults. Well, what do we have here? A couple of lost kids. "Where are you from, boy?" one of the adults said as they circled the boys. Naruto, who was more experienced, looked at the adults not backing down before he charged the closest adult. The adult was surprised at this that he was pushed into the wall. Naruto and Sasuke both ran for it. They almost made it to the end of the alley before the adults caught up with them. "Why, you little punk, I am going to enjoy beating the shit out of you before we sell you to some slavers." They all charged and were almost upon them when they suddenly stopped. Why? Because in front of them were the Imperial Guard with their weapons drawn. "Stop. You will not harm a single hair on the prince's head," a guard yelled. After hearing this the group of men's faces went pale. They were about to assault a prince. "You lie, he is too young to be the prince," the leader of the group said. "No, he is the son of the crown prince of Metal, here to stay with his grandparents. For the attempted kidnapping and assault your lives are hereby forfeit," the guards said. The men tried to apologize, but it fell on deaf ears as they were cut down. The guards then turned to Naruto and went to one knee, left hand on the ground and the right across their. "Hail, Prince Naruto." They all yelled in unison. Then the leader looked up. "My name is Virgil Sparta from the 2nd Battalion of the Our King's army. I was sent here to escort you back to the castle, my lord." Naruto didn't know what to say, so he just nodded his head. As soon as this was done the guards surrounded the boys and began to escort them to the docks to collect their belongings. As they neared the boat the boys' bodyguards came running and got in front of the guards. "Prince Naruto, thank the spirits you are okay," the leader said as they all bowed. "It's okay," was all Naruto said and continued to walk towards the boat. Soon they were all on the dock of the ship with the captain speaking with some more guards. As the letter said, "I have brought the young prince to this dock safely. They are currently seeing the shops in town with my best crewmen. I assure you that they are safe." At this the bodyguards flinched and Naruto saw this. He signaled to the Virgil to come closer. "Sparta-san, please don't say anything of what happened back in town." "Of course my lord, I will not say anything." And Virgil went back into formation. Such a noble prince looking out for the safety of the people, for I am certain that if the captain found out they would have been killed. It will be an honor to fight and die for him. They continued to walk until they were in front of the king's personal guard. General Granjuiz, it is an honor to meet you. I have located the prince and his escorts in town and brought them back here. He said as he saluted. Very good. He turned to Naruto, who was looking straight at him with a curious stare. He chuckled silently. It was the same response everywhere he went. He was huge for a man running at almost 7 feet tall. His body structure was huge. His most noticeable feature was his face. It was covered in scars from years of fighting. Though his features were frightening, his aura told a different tale. It was one of protection and wisdom. My prince, I am honored to escort you back home where you should have been in the first place. He turned to his men and made a couple of hand gestures. The men went onto the boat to retrieve Naruto and Sasuke's belongings. My prince, who is you, friend? His name's Sasuke Uchiha, he is my best friend. Even though he could have stayed in Konoha and be treated like a prince, he instead came with me. Naruto replied as Sasuke blushed. He said that he wants to train and get stronger through hard work, then have it given to him. Such a noble thing. I promise that you will be as strong as you want to be only if you are willing to work hard. The general stated as he patted Sasuke's head. Well, in that case we should get going then. The quicker we get to the castle, the quicker we can get both of you trained then. The guards all surrounded the two boys and escorted them to a carriage and soon left the port city. On the way, Naruto looked out of the carriage and saw the open plains of metal. In contrast to the city, the countryside was full of flowers and trees. Very beautiful compared to Konoha. As they passed a small town, they saw how happy the villagers were, children playing on the streets. It took them 6 hours to reach the capital city of Kaizo. As soon as they crossed into the city, every villager was lined up along the street, cheering for the return of the crown prince. Granjuiz, why are they cheering? Asked a very confused Naruto as he looked outside of the window. When he did, the villagers cheered even louder. Because Prince Naruto, they finally have you back where you belong. Many years the people of Metal have waited for your return. The king, your grandfather, tried to get you back peacefully, but the Hokage would not budge. We were close to going to war with Konoha. You are that important to our people. The old general said as he looked at the young prince. As they progressed deeper into the city, Naruto saw that while the port city was big, it was no comparison to the city they were now in. The buildings were huge and tall, almost touching the sky, to Naruto's small stature anyways, but the biggest building in the whole city was up in the mountains. It was a castle, one of the biggest in all the lands. As they neared the gates, Naruto and Sasuke looked in awe. The gate was huge. It was so wide that 200 men standing side by side could easily walk through it. It took them 10 minutes for the convoy to reach the front door of the castle, but when they arrived they were greeted by all the servant and maids, and in front of the door were 2 people dressed in royal clothes, almost jumping with joy. The carriage finally stopped, the door opened and out stepped Naruto and Sasuke. As soon as Naruto's foot hit the ground, everyone yelled, "Welcome home, Prince Naruto." It was so loud that everyone in the city began to chant, "Long live the prince." And the celebration began, one that lasted all through the night and well into the next day. Naruto had met with his grandparents, and it was very emotional for both parties. After telling them about his life in Konoha, they were about to mass the army and burn that village down, but after Naruto told them that he didn't want them to, they calmed down. After that they talked about his father and mother. Naruto was overjoyed to find out that they really did love him and had not abandoned him like the villager had told him all his life. Naruto introduced them to Sasuke and how he was like a brother to him. Naruto also told his grandparents about how Sasuke's brother had went insane and killed all his family, but left him alive for what reason he did not know. The rest of the night both Naruto and his grandparents talked his future and the future of Sasuke. It was bitter cold morning, and on top of a hill overlooking the great open plain was a figure clad in armor. The armor was crimson in color and had spikes on the shoulder, elbow, and knee areas. The arms had intimating etching of a 9-tailed fox and flames. His helmet was on the ground, leaving his head and neck exposed. His blonde shoulder-length hair was placed in a ponytail and fluttered in the cold morning wind. His deep blue eyes surveying the open plains as if looking for something. His face, though handsome, had a hardened look to it. Something was going to happen soon, and it wasn't the upcoming battle that was to ensue in the next couple of hours. "My lord, the scouts have finally come in. The news is not good," an armored soldier said as he knelt to his lord. "I see, and what of my brother? Has there been any news of him?" the man asked. "Not as of yet. The last bit of news we have of him places him 4 days away south of here, and that was 3 days ago," he answered, still bowing to the man. The Crimson Man gave out a frustrated sigh as he picked up his helmet from the ground and placed it on his head. The helmet was crimson in color as the rest of the armor. It covered nearly the whole head, except for the eyes, and the mouth was partially covered. Just above the eye line was a gold crown that signifying someone of royalty. "Very well, back to your post." And the soldier slammed his fist to his and left. The man got on his steed which was also clad in red intimating armor and rode back to camp never knowing that he was being watched. So one of the princes of metal is here, this is our chance to remove one of the heirs to the throne. A shadow clear across the plain chuckled as he put away his telescope, I must report this to my lord. And the shadow vanished. As the crimson armored man reached the outer perimeter of the camp he was greeted by two soldiers, after getting of his horse, they immediately took it back to the stable to feed and groom it. The man walked into the camp and as he walked all the soldiers stood at attention and as he passed would slam their right hand into their plates and bow to him. As he almost reached the center tent he was met with three of his ranking officers. Virgil Sparta his general and longtime friend, Martin Lockhart commander of his archers, and finally Dante Sparta youngest of the Sparta family and commander of the infantry and cavalry. Prince Naruto we have got a full report from the scouts and to put it frankly it doesn't look good. Virgil said as they walked into the tent. So I hear so let's hear it. Naruto said as he looked at the map on the table. From reports of the scouts the main army led by the Prince of Meadow have made contact with 3 other regiments which boost their manpower tenfold as 2 of the regiments are still fresh. This puts us at a huge disadvantage as they now outnumber us 3-1. Virgil stated as he placed 3 red markers next one that was already on the map. Also they are moving faster than we once thought and will be here by tomorrow morning than 3 days from now as we originally thought. Virgil finished. Naruto looked at the map and let out another sigh, he really wished his brother was there, but he would have to make do with what he had. I see well there isn't much we can do as retreating is not an option we would have to make do with what we have and pray to the spirits that my brother and his men make it in time. So this is what we are going to do and with that the meeting continued well into the night. Meanwhile many miles away a large force of armor-clad men could be seen marching north, at the front were 3 men riding on horses. The 2 that were flanking the center man were obvious generals and personal bodyguards to the man in the center. The man they were flanking had similar armor to the one Naruto was wearing only that it was blue in color and instead of the fox and fire etching, there was a fan and lightning. Don't worry my brother I am coming. Was all that was going through his head. As all the preparations for the battle and race to reach the battlefield waged on in the port city of Vernade, a small delegation of Konoha members were seen coming off the latest boat from the west. It consisted of the current Hokage and the elders, along with all the major clan heads and their families and some Jonins for protection. They had tried for years to get permission to enter the Metal Kingdom and it wasn't until recently that it was granted. As they walked down the busy port city street, they noticed that the town was very clean and showed no signs of urban decay, even though the town itself was almost 5 centuries old and infant compared to the rest of the kingdom. As they walked they noticed that everyone were looking at them with resentment and anger in their eyes. Most were confused by this, mainly the younger generation, the older generation knew exactly why and were shamed by the fact. When news of Naruto heritage came to light it nearly caused a civil war, but shit really hit the fan when they find out that the last loyal Uchiha had went with him. Demands for their return began to pour in, but the third simply stated that if they demand his return and even try to take him by force, then the whole Metal Kingdom would fall upon Konoha. Many civilians committed suicide as the guilt of what they had done finally sunk in. The following years of the Uzumaki and Uchiha heir disappearance, there was an influx of civilian children joining the ninja academy. Why that happened no one knows even to this day. As the group walked to the assigned meeting point they were met with a small armed group of guards. Halt, state your name and business. The leader of the group yelled. Then the elderly Hokage walked to the front of the group and produced some paperwork. We have been allowed permission by the king of this country to enter his lands and we have also been summoned upon our arrival. We are just waiting for our escorts to meet with us. The leader of the group looked over the paperwork and nodded and let the group pass. Once arriving to the meeting point they were met with a caravan of carriages. They were 7 in total, 1 for every clan head and their families. They were instructed to get into the carriages as they were in a hurry. Confused by this, Ino, daughter of Inoichi and heiress to the Yamanaka clan, spoke. Why are you in such a hurry? Then she said something that completely confused the whole Konoha group except for her family and surprisingly Kurenai. What has happened since the last time I was here? At first the leader of the escort guard was pissed that someone from Konoha was demanding information about the going on of their kingdom and was about to yell at the girl, but paled when he realized who that girl was. Listen you brat, what is going on in our country is none of your concern, so then he turned around to face the girl. Stay out of oral. Lady Ino. Then he bowed. Please forgive me and my insolence, I did not realize who you were. The man said as sweating profusely. But Ino just waved it off. Just don't let that happen again. You still have not answered my question, she said annoyed. The man quickly stood at attention and began to recap the happenings of the past year. Milady, we have been at war with the Meadow Kingdom for almost a whole year. We still don't know why they declared war on us, but the princes of metal have been on the front line since the start of the war. The last communication we got stated that the pass into the royal capital would be the next battlefield and would be closed in the next 2 days. If we don't make it to the pass before they close it, then we would be stuck in the Steel Lands for a while. As he spoke, he gave out signals to the others to bring Ino's personal carriage and commission more guards for the trip, as they had royalty with them. After loading up the carriages, they quickly sped off, not knowing the danger they were in. The following, an army was posed for attack. Over the next hill was the enemy, ready to take their lives and worse, their land. Naruto was on the same hill he was the day before. By his side were 3 of his most trusted officers. First was Virgil Sparta, general of the entire army, Martin Lionheart, commander of the archers and artillery, and Dante Sparta, younger brother of Virgil and commander of the infantry. "Is everything ready?" Naruto asked. "Yes, my lord, though I must warn you that we are spread too thin," Virgil said, on top of his black horse, which was covered in chrome armor. "Yes, I understand, but there is nothing that we can do about it. Reinforcements are not here yet, and my brother is yet to be found," Naruto said with a sigh as he overlooked at his army. 900 men, 200 of them archers equipped with the finest longbow metal, could make. In fact, metal archers were the best of the best in all of the country, and maybe the world. They were positioned on the flanks of the infantry, 100 on each line. They formed a 2-line formation and were currently waiting orders of their captain to let loose. 600 were infantry that were lined up in the center of the field. The veterans were in the front of the line. Their armors were made of the strongest metal the country could find, but unlike the prince's armor, it did not cover vital areas, as it would hinder movement, which is why the prince would always ride his horse into battle. But once in battle, the prince was a juggernaut. The infantrymen were sectioned off into smaller groups, 6 in total, 100 men each. They were spaced out to cover the whole field, though in doing so left huge gaps. 50 cavalry and 50 catapults were placed in strategist positions. "My lord, the enemy approaches. They will cross over the hill any second," a scout yelled. As soon as he finished, the ground began to tremble, which startled. Naruto pulled out his telescope and gasped. In the distance was thousands of enemy troops marching towards them, but quickly regained his composure. After waiting for a couple of minutes, the enemy was finally in range for the archers, but suddenly a lone figure rode slowly towards the center of the field wielding a white flag. Naruto saw this and immediately knew what was going on, so he himself went to the center of the field to meet up with the man. After slowly riding to the center, he was met with a man who was also wearing royal armor. It was black in color and had no other markings. "Ah, Prince Naruto, when my scouts told me that you were on the front lines, I couldn't believe it," the man said in gruff voice. Naruto frowned at the man as he hated him with a passion. "Prince Darius, tell me, why have you invaded my lands? What is the purpose of this?" "Haha, you of all people should know why. Land. Your lands are rich of metal ore, fertile lands, and also have the only trade route to the west into the elemental countries. You people have had control of those lands for far too long. I intend to claim these lands for the Meadow Kingdom by destroying metal, killing the men and enslaving the women and children," Darius said while laughing at the end. Naruto looked at Darius with great rage. "Darius, by the end of this battle we will meet again, and in the end you will be staring down at the point of my blade. When you do, the last thing you will hear leaving this world is me telling you how I am going to burn Meadow to the ground." And with that, Naruto rode back to his camp while Darius looked slightly shaken because he saw the eyes of his enemy. Everyone knew those eyes and who they belonged to, the red-eyed prince of hell. Naruto got back to camp and yelled, "Archers." And the trumpet sounded. At the flanks, the captains were issuing orders for the archers to get ready. Naruto lifted his hand and dropped it to his side. Yells of fire were heard and the archers let their arrows fly. 200 arrows could be seen flying through the air. The enemy was marching forward when the arrows hit, the sound of flesh being penetrating, and screams of pain could be heard as hundreds of men fell to the ground, never to get back up. Then the second volley was sent into the air, taking out about half the amount as they were ready for them. The third and fourth were sent out before the army was close enough for the catapults. After giving the signal, the catapult sent flying huge liquid-filled containers. As the containers hit the ground, liquid sprayed everywhere and covered a good portion of land and men. Then he yelled for the flaming arrows to fly, which did a couple of seconds later. When the arrows hit the liquid, it engulfed the entire area in flames. The screams of the men as they burnt alive was heard all over the plain. Darius was furious. He had lost a good portion of his men and he hadn't even hit the main force. He ordered his archers to send their arrows flying, but Naruto had already knew they were coming as he ordered shields. And the entire infantry shielded themselves from the first, second, third volley. The entire area was covered by arrows. After waiting for the flames to dissipate, Naruto took out his blade and began to slowly charge the enemy. His men followed. Faster and faster, both armies charged at each other, shaking the ground beneath them, when suddenly the masses collided into a massive chaos. Heads, arms, blades and blood flew into the air. Naruto was on his horse taking out many of the enemy's lower members. He was knocked off his horse when he was hit by a mace. Stunned and disoriented, he did not notice that 4 men were already swinging their swords to remove his head. Dante had seen this and pushed Naruto out of the way before dispatching the 4 men. After Naruto got his senses back, he went back to fight, not before he thanked Dante for saving his life. Naruto fought his way to the center of the battlefield where most of the fighting was taking place. He swung his blade and sliced a poor man through the heart and used his body as shield when another came removing his head. As he was about to swing again, a blade struck him from behind, but the blade stopped it. He took out a shorter sword from his hidden sheath from the armor and killed the man in front of him before turning around and throwing the short blade, hitting the man through the neck. As the man fell, he grabbed the hilt of the blade and blocked another attempt, only cleave him in half. Though his armor was crimson in color, you could still see that he was covered in the blood of his enemy, but he did not care as he had only one thing going through his mind, taking the head of Darius. As the battle progressed, Darius was feeling a small twinge of fear creep throughout his being. He had never thought that a small force as the one he was fighting could be so vicious in battle. Yes, they were falling like flies, but they did not run, no, they fought even harder. Then he saw the prince making his way towards him. He looked like a demon possessed, his red eyes shining through his helmet and bearing its gaze into the very depths of his soul. He wanted to run but couldn't, and besides his army was winning anyways, only a miracle could save him now. Back with the Konoha convoy, Ino was looking out of her carriage. She was happy to be back in the Metal Kingdom. The flowers here were much prettier than the ones back in Konoha. As she gazed out in the field, she noticed a large group of armed men marching in the same direction as they were. It was then she noticed the flags they were carrying. The flags had the symbol of metal on them, but some of the banners had fans on them, and she immediately knew who they belonged to. Sarutobi and the elders, along with all of the clan heads, knew whose banner that belonged to, the Uchiha clan, and only one person could wield such a banner, Sasuke Uchiha. They wondered what he was doing out here and with that many armed men. They looked on as they tried to find Sasuke, but could as they were too far away. Suddenly the convoy stopped as 3 of the men from the marching army rode towards them. Everyone was worried as to why they were stopped. Suddenly they heard some people talking. "Halt, you cannot pass through here, it is far too dangerous for such a large group to cross," a man yelled. Then the 3 men finally made it to the convoy. "Tell me, who are these people?" the man in blue asked. "Prince, I have yet to question who they are, but seeing that carriage there belongs to Lady Ino, I say these are the group from Konoha, my lord." "Very well, tell me, has my brother encountered the enemy yet?" Sasuke asked. "Yes, my lord, Prince Naruto is in battle as we speak, but I am afraid that he might not make it as the army he faces outnumbers them 3 to 1. His battle is about 3 miles north of here. He gave us orders to let no one pass until the battle is over. We pray to the spirits for his safe return," the man said as he bowed. "Very well, tell them that they can take refuge in the next fort, which is 2 miles from here, as it is far too dangerous for them to be in the open." And with that, Sasuke and his bodyguards generals rode back to his troops. "Hold on, Naruto, help is on the way." Everyone was on edge as they heard that a battle was taking place not 3 miles from their position. The elders were having a panic attack as they haven't seen battle in over 20 years. The current shinobi went into alert mode. The guards immediately got into formation and sped off to take their charges into the safety of the fortress. They made to the gates of the fortress only to be ambushed by a scout team. The guards fought off the enemy but had taken severe casualties. Once inside of the fortress, they were sent to the main tower in the center of the fortress. Ino and Kurenai went to the top of tower and looked out into the distance. There far off she could see the smoke of battle, then she felt someone tapping her on the shoulder. She turned around and saw one of the guards with a high-powered telescope. She thanked him and began to look through it. She saw the dead bodies of the metal soldiers and the meadow alike. She let out tears of sorrow for the fallen, then she began to scan the battlefield looking for someone. Inside the fortress, Sarutobi and the group were sitting in the main hall, then a man dressed in robes came in. He began to chant something in a language that they did not know. The room went dark until you could not see the room anymore. Then a flash of light, they were in a meadow, then it felt like they were moving at a great speed until they stopped in what appeared to be a battlefield. At first they were frightened as they thought they were in battle, but that quickly changed as they noticed that the bodies had no physical properties and were only an illusion. They watched as a smaller army fought an army that had superior numbers. Then they saw a man covered in the blood of the enemy. His armor had etching of a 9-tailed fox and flame. They watched as he pushed forward, cutting down the enemy with great anger. Ino at this point had returned to the hall. The old man walked to her and bowed. "My lady, I did as you asked." "Thank you, Mundus," Ino replied, which made the old man very happy. Sarutobi had enough of being in the dark and went to ask Ino what was going on and why everyone was acting as if she was a princess or something, but the look that the guards were giving him, he decided that he would ask later. After deciding that he would, his answers at a later time, went back to looking at the battle. 3 hours had passed since the beginning of the battle. Darius was getting frustrated. Why didn't Naruto and his army just give up? He had superior numbers and still they did not back down. To make matter worse, Naruto was only a couple of feet away from him. Darius knew that he was no match for the warrior prince of metal. Then he gave out a sinister smile as he was about to use his trump card. "Bring them in," was all he said. Suddenly the ground began to shake, knocking most of the men to the ground. Naruto frantically looked around to find the source. That is when he heard one of his men yell elementals. Everyone gasped at the sight of the creatures. They were horrendous, 4 in total, 1 for each of the elements. The fire golem was 10 feet tall, made completely of fire. He was a cross between a horse and man. The earth golem was a troll that was made from stone, air was a serpent with wings, water was a turtle that had horns on its head, and the skeletons of the men that it had killed. They ransacked the battlefield, killing everyone, even the meadow soldiers. Naruto suddenly began to chant something before a beam of light shot into the air. Suddenly a roar stopped the elemental creatures in their tracks. Out of the sky came 2 dragons. They were the most beautiful creature anyone had ever seen. Their scales shined in the sunlight. Their wings spanned a good 10 feet in each direction. Their slender frames made them very quick on the ground as well as in the air. Both of them landed next to Naruto and bowed their heads, which Naruto began to pet. Then Naruto pointed towards the elemental creatures, and his dragon knew what to do and began to attack them. Overlooking the battle was Sasuke. He saw when the elementals were called in. He was about to call his dragons, but saw that Naruto had already called his. Bahamut and Dragnoya were the most powerful dragons metal had, and they only listened to Naruto. The battle had turned once again in favor for Naruto, and Darius knew this. Even with the superior numbers, he still could not compete with the prowess of Naruto and his knights. He was about to call the retreat when he saw Naruto call upon his dragons, but something had stopped him. The wall of fire came to life, cutting off his escape. Looking into the distance, he saw something. He put fear into the very depths of his being. "The Sapphire Devil," he said in a whisper. Sasuke yelled to his troops to attack and leave no one alive, then charged himself. Hundreds of fresh soldiers stormed the plains, killing the now tired enemy. They were massacred as they could not retreat. Naruto's men were overjoyed when Sasuke and his men came. It had only took them 10 minutes before the last soldier and elemental was killed, leaving only Darius in chains. Ino watched as Naruto summoned his dragons. She watched as he fought hundreds of enemy soldiers. She watched in tears when he was stabbed through the stomach by 3 soldiers only to be decapitated, then removed the swords and began to fight as if nothing had happened, and now she watched as Sasuke and Naruto stood in front of the defeated Prince of Meadow. His hands were tied and forced to his knees. He was looking down, refusing to look at Naruto, as if he would have to look up, and he as a prince would be a humiliation. "So you think you can come into my lands, kill my people, steal my resources, and that I would not do anything about it? For the past year our kingdoms have been at war with each other, but today this war is over, and I will be sending your headless corpse back to your father. If he is wise, he will pull his men from my lands, or he will lose more sons, and his daughter will lose their maidenhoods to my men, before serving the rest of their lives as common slaves," Naruto said as he raised his sword. Darius began to laugh. "No, it would be your people who will become slaves. Both your wives will become the personal concubines for my father. I bet he will enjoy ravaging their lovely bodies every night, as they like whores." Then he spit out some blood. "Pity I did not get a taste. I bet they were very good." It was as far as they got before his head fell to the ground. Back at the fortress, everyone watched as Ino and Kurenai shuddered when Darius stated that Naruto and Sasuke's wives would be taken as concubines for the king of Meadow, then angered when they called them whores. "So it's finally over, brother," Sasuke said as he removed his helmet. Everyone at the fort gasped when they saw his face. He looked exactly like his father. The only difference was he had a scar on the right side of his face and another on the left eye, starting by the eyebrow and stopping mid-cheek. From what they saw, they knew that he had been in many battles. For now then Naruto took off his helmet and another round of gasps could be heard. He looked exactly like his father as well, only that he had 6 whiskers on his face, 3 on each side. Many of the female ninja with the group blushed when they saw the faces of Naruto and Sasuke and were already making plans. "I will have my men clean up the battlefield and bury our dead and burn the rest," Sasuke said as they walked back to Naruto's camp. "But I will send out an order to have the pass opened, but to stay on high alert." Naruto then began to remove his armor so that he could get cleaned up. Ino saw how the other females watched with blushes on their faces as he began with his arms, then saw when the plate came off showing his strong physique, they had blood coming out of their noses. Then when he was going to remove his leggings, she cut of the technique and they were back in the main hall. Many of them began to yell, but stopped when they saw the glare that Ino was giving them. Then a guard came in tell them that the pass was open and that they should be on their way. 3 hours later they had finally made it the gates of the royal city. Many of the Konoha ninja were in awe by the sheer beauty of the place. Even though the city was ancient, it was still in fairly good condition. As they made their way through the city, they noticed that everyone were in a very good mood. They had an idea why as they saw them cheering when Ino's carriage rolled into view. "I hope our husbands are okay," Ino said as she looked out of her window. I am sure they are fine besides Merle, and Naomi always take care of them when we go back to Konoha. Kurenai said as she too looked out the window. I guess you are right, I just hate it when I have to leave. I wish I could stay here with my husband all the time. Well, it looks like it might happen. I think the third knows something is going on, and I doubt the king will let us leave for fear of what those people will do to us. Ino smiled when Kurenai said that as she was right, she was happy they could stay by her husband's side and finally start a family. It had been 4 weeks since they witnessed the battle at the Royal Pass. 4 weeks since they had any news about where Naruto and Sasuke are. The last news they had placed them heading east towards the royal city of Romus. Nothing much had happened in those 4 weeks, the only major thing was when Asuma the third son tried to force himself on Kurenai. He had pursued her for over 3 years now and was only met with rejection. 3 weeks ago as they walked through one of the palace's rose gardens, Asuma tried to get her to go out with her. Flashback 3 weeks ago. On Kurenai-chan, just one date, I promise that you will never regret it. Kurenai looked at Asuma with disgust in her eyes, how dare he try and ask her out when she was already a married woman. She was very loyal to her husband who was 10 times better than Asuma. Yes, he was 4 years younger than her, but that did not matter to the 22-year-old, as she loved him, and he loved her. I told you before that I will not go out with you, besides I already have someone. She said with annoyance in her voice, which some of the guards picked up and were already moving to help her. Asuma was outraged, he had claimed her as his and someone dared and take his prize. No. Not happening, she was his and his alone, no man will have claim on what was already claimed. Now listen here you bitch, I have already claimed you as mine, no man will take what is mine. I will have you in my bed and you will obey to my every whim. He yelled at her as he grabbed her and roughly kissed her. Kurenai could not believe what was happening, this man had dared to kiss her and then had the audacity to say that he had claim over her, as if she was some piece of property, the nerve of him. She knew that once Sasuke found out about this he would have his head at her feet for this transgression. She was about to slap Asuma when her personal guards intercepted Asuma. You dare enforce yourself on the princess, you commoner. The lead female guard yelled as she moved Kurenai behind her and into the group of armed women. I tell you now that the king will hear of this. Now leave. Asuma was about to say something, but was interrupted by the arrival of his father and the king. After demanding what was going on, the female guard reported everything that had happened between the two. The king was furious and wanted to take the head of the man who dared to touch one of the daughters of metal. Instead of killing Asuma, he simply banished him from the castle, never to enter again. He placed him in one of the higher-end inns as he was still a guest. It was then decided that Ino and Kurenai would be moved from the group and have their guards with them at all times. The girls were relieved at this as this was not the first time this sort of thing had happened. The elders were in an uproar. All this time they had members of the royal house in their ranks, and they did not know. How they were of the royal house they did not care, but what they did care is that they would be close to the heirs of the Uzumaki and Uchiha clans, they could have used them to convince them to return to Konoha. It wasn't until the king ordered them to be removed from the group that they realized what an opportunity they let slide. Lady Uchiha and Lady Namikaze, your baths are ready. The female guard said as she bowed to her mistresses. They are their wives. Screamed the elder council as they saw their greatest opportunity walk out of the rose garden. They would try for the next 3 weeks to convince them to talk to their husbands and have them return to Konoha, but would fail as the guards would not let them near them. Flashback over. Ino and Kurenai were walking in one of the personal rose gardens of the castle. They were deep in thought about the current war and the safety of their beloved husbands. Yes, they knew that this was the norm in this part of the world, unlike how it is in the elemental countries. The leaders of a country actually went into battle with the troops. The only reason the king was still in the castle was because he was sick at the time and Naruto and Sasuke went in his place. As he got better he sent for his grandsons only to be met with refusal, stating that they would see this war to the end and that he should be ready should they fail, which was unlikely. Kurenai-chan, do you think this war will be over soon? I miss my Naruto. Ino said as she smelled one of the roses. Naruto had put a lot of work into this garden as it was a gift for his princess. Ino had always loved flowers since she was little girl. When Naruto presented her with this beautiful garden, she knew that he was the one for her. She still remembered the first time she had met Naruto outside of Konoha, she was 12 at the time. Her father and mother had said that they were going on a little trip for about 3 months. She was amazed the first time she had set foot in Metal Country. The tall buildings had Ino bewildered, she had never seen such tall structures. She was a little confused as to why some of the armed men spoke to her father, as if he was someone of high status, but she did not care. The trip to the castle was a short one, but she still loved to look at the open meadows of metal, she loved to stare at the many different colored flowers that splashed the ground. They arrived to a castle, and many of the servants came to greet them, she heard them call her father lord and her mother lady. When they placed her in her room she was surprised to see that the room was something a princess would have. She was cleaned up and they dressed her in a dress fit for a princess. By this time she was sure that she was a princess and that her father was a king or something by the way everyone acted around them. It wasn't until dinner that she found out that her parents weren't the king and queen, but very good friends to the king. It was then that she saw someone that she thought she had seen back at home. It was a 16-year-old Kurenai. She was with a younger Sasuke and Naruto. At first her eyes were on Sasuke, but then her attention went to the blonde, and since then she never looked away. As it turned out, Kurenai and Ino's father had helped Naruto and Sasuke reach the port city safely 5 years ago. For the next 5 years Kurenai would travel with her father to Metal to give his yearly report along with Ino's father. This was the first time that he had brought his entire family with him. He had told her that her mother was going to stay here in Metal, and that if she wanted to stay then she could. In the end she opted to return to Konoha with her father, returning every years after that to see her mother, and more importantly her Naruto. It was only last year that they had finally married along with Sasuke and Kurenai. The whole country was brimming with joy when the bells sounded announcing the marriages of the princes of Metal and the births of the daughters of Metal. "I hope so, Ino-chan, I really miss my dear Sasuke," Kurenai said with a depressed tone. She really missed her husband. It had only been a year since they had become husband and wife. She really wanted him to return so he could fulfill another one of her dreams, to become a mother. She blushed as she thought about it. They continued to walk through the garden talking about what they were going to do when their husbands returned. Sarutobi was having a bad 4 weeks. First his idiot son tried to force himself on Kurenai. He was shocked to find out that she was the Uchiha's wife. The elders were in an uproar about that information. Then he finds out that Ino was Naruto's wife, but when did this all happen? He suddenly remembered that she and her family would take a 3-month vacation every year. He never asked where they went nor he cared, but maybe this is where they went every year. That would mean that they were spies for Metal, which made sense seeing that when Minato and Kushina died all records of Naruto's birth was sealed, but yet Metal found out about him and the demands for his retrieval began. He tried many times to speak with both women, but the guards never allowed him or any of the Konohanins near them. Ino and Kurenai also seemed to want to stay as far away as possible, opting to stay in their personal wing most of the day, only coming out to get something to eat or go into the village heavily guarded of course. Not that the villagers would do anything as they seemed to love them both very much. To make matters worse, his council was demanding that they should be placed into their custody until Naruto and Sasuke agree to return to Konoha. He told him that as they wanted to do something so stupid then go right ahead, he would not lift a finger to protect Konoha, as he knew for sure that if any harm would to come to the woman, then the full wrath of Metal would fall on them. He only hoped that when they told Naruto and Sasuke about how Konoha missed them, that they would at least come and visit the village if only for a while. Meanwhile in an open plain 2 armies stared at each other, their numbers in the thousands. On one side was the army of Metal. Naruto and Sasuke could be seen at the highest point of the plain, clad in their royal armor as they surveyed the area. 3 weeks ago they had received reinforcements from one of garrisons that bordered the 2 kingdoms. They marched for 3 weeks ransacking any town they came across, they burned them to the ground and killed all the men, but left the children and women alone to cry for the dead. Once they reached the capital city of Romus they stopped. King Morris immediately called forth his entire army to the front lines. He was determined to stop the invading army from coming and destroy his kingdom. He was outraged when he received word that his eldest had fallen in battle, but when he was given the headless corpse, his outrage changed to unbridled rage. He knew that the Metal army was coming for his head, and he was determined to stop them. Thousands upon thousands of armed men stood facing each other, the sun high in the cloudless sky, casting away any shadows. The air thick with anticipation and worry, everyone knew what this battle meant. One army would leave here alive, and the other would rot in the ground if they were lucky. King Morris and his 2 remaining sons slowly rode their steeds to the center of the plain that in a few moments would be littered by bodies and blood. Naruto and Sasuke did the same. As they rode they kept a fixed gaze to the elderly king and his offspring. They finally met in the center of the plain under the white flag. "Prince Naruto, Prince Sasuke, I demand that you and your army leave my lands," the king yelled. Both princes began to laugh as if everything was a big joke. "You invade my lands, kill my people, have the audacity to order me around. No, I will not leave this place until it is burned to the ground, your people broken, and your lands under the control of Metal. That would be the price of your transgression, your line will end today. Your pretty daughters will be nothing but common slaves to my army, and you know what that means. Honorable king," Naruto said as he fixed his gaze to the now horrified king. "By the end of this day Meadow Kingdom will cease to exist, your head will be on spikes, and your daughters will become the personal whores to the soldiers of Metal, not before I have a small taste. If they manage please me and my brother they might just become our concubines," Sasuke said as his horse bucked a little. "How dare you?" the king yelled, angered by the statements that the 2 princes just stated. "I will kill you before you lay a single finger on my precious daughters." And with that both parties rode back to their armies. "Ready your arms," Naruto ordered. Seconds later the whole army were ready for battle. Archers, the sound of the various captains could be heard as they ordered the archers to ready their bows. Seconds felt like hours as the men waited for their prince's orders to start the final battle of the war. Aim. And the men raised their bows to the heavens. Fire. The sky was suddenly filled with thousands of arrows as they flew towards the meadow soldiers. Just as the first volley was about to hit the army, second volley fire. And the sky once again was darkened by the sheer numbers of arrows in the sky. The meadow soldiers were ready for the first wave as they raised their shield to protect them. They lowered the shield, and seconds later they were speared by the second wave. Arrows piercing their faces and necks, blood spewing from the gaping holes where some the arrow went straight through their bodies, hitting the soldier behind them. "Archers, fire at will," Morris yelled as he pulled his sword from its sheath. Hundreds of arrows filled the sky aimed at the metal soldiers. They too were ready as they raised their shields to protect them. Then a second volley met with the same effects, though some of the arrows managed to hit some of the soldiers, but not as much as Meadow. As soon as Morris broke through his ranks, his entire army began to run towards the enemy, same with Naruto and Sasuke, as they too were in front leading their men into battle. The sky still littered by the flying arrows, though this time had a purpose as the archers were now aiming at people, instead of just shooting their arrows into the air and hoping to hit someone. The ground shook as the two armies ran at each other. The sky began to cloud over as a storm was coming in, the air got colder, and the winds picked up, but this was not going to deter these men to stop. The sounds of metal-covered feet and armored horse hitting the ground could be heard for miles. The inhabitants of the royal city were frightened and huddled in the farthest sector of the village. The princesses could be seen in the tallest tower of the castle. They watched as their father and brothers charged towards the invading army. They shed tears as they saw their countrymen run to their deaths. Deep down they knew that this day would be their last as princesses, and they had no one to blame but themselves. They knew that Meadow was not strong enough to take on the full might of metal. They filled themselves with the illusions of grandeur, overtaken by the lust that they felt for the two princes, and then the hatred when they found out that they were taken. They manipulated the king to go to war so that they could kill the wenches that took away their loves. After the first months of the war they came to realize what a mistake it was to awaken the sleeping beast that was Metal. Though during the year Metal had never invaded, Meadow just managed to keep them from going too far into Metal. They knew that they were just biding their time. That time was when they faced their eldest brother in battle. They guessed they wanted a reason for the war, and once they found out killed their brother and sent his headless body to the king with a letter attached. "We are coming for you," was all it said. Their father immediately called for the army to mass. During the next 3 weeks they fought in small battles trying to slow down the invaders, but it proved futile. They also heard news that they were destroying villages along the way, killing the men, but not the women and children. Luckily no news of the women being raped were heard, and so with tears in their eyes, they watched the two armies become one. The two masses of people finally met in a clash of metal and flesh. The swords of metal ripping through flesh could be heard. The cries of pain from the fallen soon after drowned out the sounds of metal hitting metal and flesh. Bodies littered the ground with their blood being fed to the ground. The once beautiful countryside was now turned into a desolate plain of death and despair. Suddenly the heavens could no longer bear the cries of mercy of the dying and began to weep for the fallen. The sky was filled with thunder, almost as if yelling for the two armies to stop, but they too were drowned out by the whispers of death. Uncaring for the rain, they continued to fight, the water washing away the blood of their enemy. Naruto long ago separated from his men, and Steed fought with such ferocity the enemy, though he was the Demon King himself. To them it looked like he was having fun, and on more than one occasion they saw that his eyes were filled with glee, almost as if he took great pleasure in ending human life. This was no prince but a monster whose sole purpose in life was to kill, and that deeply frightened them. They watched as their fellow soldiers were cut down by this demon. Their headless bodies fell to the ground, but not before showering their blood all over Naruto. Then they watched as he just went towards his new targets, not fazed by death that surrounded him. They were about to charge him, but before they could move their vision went dark, their headless bodies hitting the ground followed by their heads. Behind them was Sasuke, who happened to catch up with his brother and saw that he was about to be attacked, killed the soldiers. Both princes fought their way to the king and his two sons. Morris was shocked to find that the two princes and their armies could fight with such brutality. He was also a little frightened as he knew that he was way past his prime and most likely not live to see the next sunrise. He cursed his fate and now regretted not training his other two sons like he trained his eldest. He knew that his younger sons could not fight the two battle-hardened princes. Now accepting his fate, the king charged towards the battling prince. He knew that he was going to die, but he would leave like a warrior, or so he thought. 6 hours of intense fighting and all that remained from Meadow were injured men, 2 crippled princes and a broken old man. Naruto ordered his men to kill the injured and ransack the village, but not to take the castle. The old king shed tears of despair as he heard the cries of women and children as Naruto's men pillaged everything, then finally they were silenced forever. The bound king looked towards the heaven and prayed a silent prayer to his fallen kingdom and its people. Sasuke grabbed him from the hair and forced him to watch as Naruto took a dagger and slit the throat of his youngest and most precious son. He watched in agony as he saw his son gasping for air as blood filled his lungs before succumbing to the sweet embrace of death's cold arms. Then Naruto slit the other son's throat as well, further breaking the king, but nothing broke him further as what he was about to see next. The sun had finally set and the moon was high in the sky, the ground still covered by the blood of the fallen, the dead long buried and the castle set ablaze. The king, bound and gagged, could only shed tears of shame and disgust. Why? Because for the past 3 hours he watched as his only daughters were being raped in front of his eyes. At first he cried as he heard the cries of pain coming from his daughters, but soon those cries of pain transformed into cries of passion and lust. He watched as his pure daughters were transformed from righteous women to common whore begging for more. Their lust overcoming their senses, wanting nothing more than more men in their essence. He had to endure as little by little his daughter Ed for more, often taking 3 or more men at one time. He could not stand the shame anymore and asked for death to escape from it all. He was allowed to fall on his own blade. Naruto decided to give him that small mercy. I mean, he left the world with the knowledge that his precious daughters were nothing but whores now, slaves to pleasures of the flesh. As the king died, so did the scene that he was forced to watch, in a place where 3 Magi chanting something in a language long dead. "It is done, my lord," the head Magi said as he bowed. "The king is dead, and so is the illusion. If we may, we must rest." "Very well, you may go," Naruto said. "You all did a wonderful job as always, great Magi." Then Naruto turned around and went towards his tent. As he entered, he found that he was not alone, for in his tent were 2 princesses and his brother. "I assume that the king is dead and this war over?" Sasuke asked as he untied the 2 former princesses so they could serve them something eat and drink. "Yes, he is dead, fell on his own sword," Naruto replied as he sat down at the table as the former princesses poured some wine into his cup. They had realized that they were now the property of Prince Naruto and Sasuke. They were the only ones that kept them from making the illusion that their father had endured become a reality. After filling their cups with wine, they served them some meat as a show of submission to their new masters. Though they were slaves now, they had it better than most slaves as they had yet to take their maidenhoods, though they knew that at some point they would. In the morning, the army of metal had rounded up all the valuables Meadow had to offer. They emptied the treasury and appointed a small force to look after their new conquest. The 2 warrior princes were finally going home, with their new slaves following behind them. Completely broken and not longer pure, though the former princesses didn't mind as only the prince would look upon their bodies and ravage them thoroughly. They were their property, and deep down they loved it. 2 weeks had passed since the final battle of the Metal Meadow War has taken place, and all throughout the countryside people celebrated. They were finally at peace, and Metal had grown even stronger from it. At the castle, representatives of other kingdoms were gathered to give praise for Metal's victory over Meadow. They informed the king that the other kings and queens were coming in 3 days' time to celebrate their great victory. Naruto and Sasuke had finally made it to the outskirts of Kaizo. The sounds of trumpets welcomed the war heroes. The village suddenly burst into celebration as the people danced in the streets. Rose petals began to rain from the sky as the 2 princes rode down the main street of the village. Asuma was confused as to what he was seeing. Who were these people that the villagers broke into the streets and cheered? Sure, he had also received news that the war was over, but he did not care as all he wanted was to see Kurenai again and make her summit. He would have no other, she would be his. Being the son of the Hokage, he expected nothing but the best, and Kurenai was the best. So he went back into his room to plan his next move. He had already found entry points and the guard schedules. Tonight he would have his prize. Inside the castle, the servants were running around the great halls, preparing for the great feast and celebration. The heroes of metal have finally come home, bring with them great wealth and peace. Ino and Kurenai were in their private chambers being dressed so that they could finally meet their husbands, and if they had their way by tomorrow, their heirs would be conceived. An hour later, after setting foot in Kaizo, Naruto and Sasuke had walked down the great hall that lead into the throne room where their king and grandfather would be waiting for them. As they walked, the guards saluted the conquering princes. Still dressed in their royal armor that sported dents and holes from the battles that they had endured. As they neared the royal hall where the throne was, the trumpets began to blow announcing their return. Inside the hall, all of the guests tensed at the sudden announcement. They were nervous to meet with the 2 wayward heir of 2 highly powerful clans. They were still angry that they had ran off and joined another country, and they were still determined to get them to return home where they belonged. Ino and Kurenai could not contain their happiness. The king and queen saw this and sighed. "Young love, now all they need to do is give me some babies to spoil," the queen giggled. It was the morning after the great return of Prince Naruto and Prince Sasuke. The elder council of Konoha were surprised as to how Naruto looked like his father, but had the personality of his mother. They watched as Naruto called the King of Metal Old Geezer and King Pervert. He was just like his mother in that she too never had any respect for authority. Then they saw how laid back and relaxed the Uchiha heir was, which was a complete opposite to the way the Uchiha normally acted. They had to find a way for them to return to Konoha, but really what did they have to offer? They were princes here, and in Konoha they would only be head of their clans and under the authority of a Hokage in the council. Here they were the authority. As they watched them interact with the high-ranking generals of the land, they knew that if one of them ordered one of the generals to jump, then the general would jump for the rest of his or her days until told otherwise. That's how much power these two possessed, and they hated that fact. They would have to tread carefully as to not wake the now resting beast that was metal. The third was happy to see Naruto and Sasuke again after so many years. He was also saddened that they had found happiness in another country hundreds of miles away from Konoha. He had talked to the two along with their wives. He was surprised when he found out that he had two princesses in his employment. He also thanked the spirits that he did not give them one of the special mission that were reserved for his female ninjas, not that they weren't special request for the two. Deep down he knew that if he had ordered them to do them, then he would have to face the wrath of not only metal, but of two rather pissed husbands. Well, at the time he did not know their connection to metal, but he knew that something bad would happen. Now he knew what, and he was glad for following his gut feeling. The small reunion was cut short as the two were tired from marching all day and night to return home. They were escorted to their bedchambers by their blushing wives. The king and queen knew that their grandson's night was far from over, and they were right if the cries of passion the castle heard throughout the night were any indication. The next morning, two exhausted princes woke up to the silent snores of their beautiful wives. They watched lovingly as they slept. They were happy to be back. Quietly and gently as to not wake them, they got up from bed and headed towards their separate royal bathing chambers. They were huge in size, as the baths were the size of a large pool. In the center of the bath were two statues of women with jars in their hands. From the jars, warm water poured into the bath. The floors were made from the best polished stone. Vines and flowers were everywhere. The place was so beautiful and serene that sometimes they would stay in the water for hours on end. As they walked in, four skimpy dress women began to strip a little clothing they had and prepared them for their baths. Now, to many wives, having four skimpy dressed beautiful women undressing their husbands would piss them off, but for Kurenai and Ino it did not bother them. Well, at first it did, but they got over it. They were royalty and things like this was normal and expected. They knew that sometimes they would do things to the women as it was their right. They knew that they loved them even more than the women that sometimes shared their bed. They had a deeper connection to their husbands, and truthfully they sometimes took the women to their beds as well. The women began to bath their masters carefully. They knew what they were and what their duties were, so when a certain body part began to stiffen, they immediately went to work. Sometime it was orally, but on more than one occasion it went further. Today was no difference, but the princes had refused their services as they were still tired, so they kept washing them tenderly. After bathing them, they dried them off and dressed them. After dismissing them, they began to walk through the halls of their respected wing. Naruto's wing of the castle was inspired by nature and its mystical creatures. Statues of tigers, foxes, dragons, and the mighty phoenix littered the entire wing. Vines and flowers were everywhere, mainly for his wife's love for flowers. His wing had at least 16 gardens, all gifts to his love. Paintings of his mother and father were also placed on the walls. He had at least 100 guest rooms and 30 bathing chambers similar to his personal one, only smaller in size. Sasuke's wing design was a more modern style. Contemporary pieces were placed carefully so that it could create a more peaceful effect. He had ordered the best painters and craftsmen to make him some of the most beautiful art pieces they could make. For his wife's love for wine, he had purchased 600 acres of land and turned them into grape vineyards. He hired the best winemaker in all of the land to make his wine exclusive for his wife. Though deeply touched by this, she told the winemaker to make her a certain amount and sell the rest. Of course, the winemaker only used the best grapes to make the wine that he made for the princess. Deep underground, Sasuke made a huge wine cellar to store his wife's precious wine. He too had paintings of his mother and father, as well as at least 100 guest rooms and 30 bathing chambers. These areas were only reserved for honored guests and their escorts. Currently, Naruto had 50 guests staying in his wing. Sasuke had 30. None were from Konoha. These honored guests were kings and queens from other lands and their servants, here to celebrate the victory of metal. Though throughout the village the festivities were already going on. Inside the castle, many servants were preparing for that night's feast. Many chiefs from the village had offered their services to make their food for the feast, as it would be an honor. Many servants were running through town to purchase many supplies and goods for the party. The grand hall where the feast would take place was being decorated with the finest silk and flowers. The gold chandeliers and candle holders were polished until they shined, and you could look at yourself like in a mirror. In the wine cellar on the orders of Princess Kurenai, they were pulling vintage wine for their guest. Naruto met up with Sasuke in the king's court, they both had smiles on their faces. The king, third, and many of the older men knew why, and let out a perverted giggle. The queen and females just sighed and punched the men for being perverts. Though the female leaf ninja had blushes on their faces as they saw the two, then came in their wives as if they were floating. Good morning, they greeted in a joyful tone, which made them extremely jealous, especially a pink-haired woman and her daughter. They were already making plans to snatch up their husbands and seduce them into their beds. Ino and Kurenai saw this and were immediately on guard. Good morning, daughters, the queen greeted back, I see you had a good night. This of course made the women blush before giving out a little sigh and a yeah. Well, thinking back to the activities they did last night. The king once again gave out a slightly perverted giggle, but quickly pulled his attention to his grandsons. I see that there will soon be sounds of small feet running through these halls again, huh my sons? Both Naruto and Sasuke gave out a joyous laugh, which made the women blush again. After speaking with their grandfather and grandmother and making their wives blush even further, they made their way towards the dining hall where a large amount of food was placed. All of the guests sat down, waited for the royal family to begin before they too began to eat. Small talk could be heard among themselves before the king stood and began to speak. My honored guest, I am glad that you all have made your way here to celebrate the victory medal. I am proud of my two grandsons, for they have brought peace and riches to the land. Tonight we are going to hold a grand feast in honor for them. I hope that you attend and have a good time, until then please enjoy what my castle and village has to offer. Then he picks up his glass filled with wine. My grandsons. The Prince Naruto and Prince Sasuke. They cheered and drank the wine. Soon after everyone left the hall to see the sights and explore the castle. Naruto was walking around one of the gardens when he was stopped by a beautiful pink-haired girl with green eyes. Hi. She said in an energetic tone and smile. My name is Sakura Haruno, it's a pleasure to meet you Prince Naruto. Naruto looked at the girl, though she was beautiful she was nowhere near as lovely as his wife. He was not naive either. He knew that the girl wasn't as innocent as she had made herself to be. Either she was sent by the council of the Leaf Village or she was trying to gain power for her family, but he wasn't going to be rude to the girl. Hello Sakura. He simply replies, what can I help you with? Sakura smiled as this would be the perfect opportunity to seduce the young handsome prince. I was wondering if you can show me around town. She said as she acted to be shy. Naruto frowned as he saw right through the act. I am sorry Sakura, but I am very busy, but I tell you what I will ask one of the guards to escort you through town. How does that sound? It was Sakura's turn to frown, her plans were ruined now. Oh, she said as she looked down, no that's okay I guess I will just stay in the castle then. And she walked off, but she was not going to give up she would have her prince like she deserved. In another part of the castle Sasuke was overseeing the delivery of his wife's wine, as he always did when in the castle. Another beautiful pink-haired woman only older walked next to Sasuke. Hello Sasuke-sama, she said in a seductive tone. My name is Lily Haruno, I am pleased to finally speak to you. Sasuke looked at the woman and nearly blushed because of the closeness of her face to his, but soon caught himself and stepped back. Can I help you Lily and what is this sama? Oh sorry Sasuke-sama, but that is honorific that is given to someone of great importance and I was wondering if you could show me around as this is the first time I have been in metal. She responded seductively which made Sasuke a little uneasy. I am truly sorry, but I am extremely busy with this wine delivery. Oh wine I love wine, where was this made? Lily asked as she watched the crates being unpacked and checked. This wine is from my personal winery, I bought it for my wife as she loves wine. Though some of the wine is sold to other this wine is of the best quality. Only the best for my love. Sasuke answered with pride. Then he pulled a bottle of wine from the crate to inspect. Here have a taste. He said as he poured a small amount into a small glass and gave it to the woman. Lily drank the sample and immediately fell in love with the wine, it was of the best quality and knew that it would get better with age. Wow this stuff is good, where I can get some? She asked. I am sorry, but this wine is for my wife, though the winery does sell some of the inferior wine, the best is only reserved for my wife. Sasuke answered as he placed the now sealed bottle into a basket and ordered a maid to give it to Kurenai. This of course made Lily a little angry, it was not fair that this wine was only for the spoiled wife of a prince. This made her resolve to seduce the prince away from her even more, she wanted to be spoiled rotten. In her mind she deserved it more than Kurenai. She is a very lucky woman. She said in a happy tone, but inside she was jealous. In more ways than one. Then she latched onto Sasuke's arm letting him feel her s. Sasuke was shocked by the sudden upfront action of the woman that he began to blush. This of course made Lily smile, this was the reaction she was looking for. This meant that her efforts were working and it would only be a matter of time before she would be in the prince's bed. Sasuke quickly recovered and removed his arm from the grasp of Lily. Lily, please refrain from touching me in such an intimate fashion. I am a happily married man, and such only my wife can do so. I will overlook this only one time, so please don't do it again. Sasuke said in a cold tone. Now if you excuse me, I have many more crates to examine, so please leave. And with that Sasuke left the disheartened woman behind. Lily could not believe that she was shot down. In Konoha she was one of the most sought out women there. She of course paid no mind to her would-be suitors as they were not of her standards. The only reason she had a daughter was because she was married to the son of the previous daimyo of Fire Country before the rebellion which killed her husband, leaving her with a 6-month-old daughter. Left with nothing, she was forced to return to Konoha and work for a living. In her mind she could only be the wife of a royal clan member, but not one of the few families took interest in her, as she was now a common woman, though they did try to take her to their bed. Now she was in the presence of a prince who was powerful, rich and handsome, but he had no interest in her whatsoever, but that was not going to stop her. She would have her prince and the lifestyle that comes with it. It was about high noon when Naruto and Sasuke met up with their wives to have lunch. In one of the exclusive gardens, the maids had put out a huge variety of fruits and meats for their master's lunch. Ino had arrived to the garden to find Naruto already waiting for her. How she loved him, she had from the first time she had seen him all those years ago, and that love had only grown. She could not wait for the time she became the mother of his children. Those blessing would be the luckiest children in the whole world. Though she had a nagging feeling that someone was trying to take her love away. She had an idea as to who it was, a certain pink-haired girl named Sakura Haruno, and she would be damned if she was going to let her get to him. "Hello my princess," Naruto said as he hugged and kissed Ino. "Did you have a good morning?" "Yes I did, beloved. I tended to one of the gardens, the roses are in full bloom, it's very beautiful. You should see them," Ino replied as she melted in her husband's embrace. "So how was your morning, love? Did anything happen?" "It was good. I had a walk through one of the garden as I headed to the stables. A girl with pink hair came up to me. I think her name was Sakura or something, I can't remember. Anyways, I think she was trying to seduce me, but I saw through it," Naruto explained. He never kept any secrets from his wife, and he knew that if needed Ino would handle things. "Yeah, I know that girl. She was once my friend back when I was in the academy. She is the daughter of the pink-haired woman named Lily," Ino explained until she was interrupted by Sasuke. "Ah, so she has a daughter as well and tried to get my brother to bed her," he replied as he walked into the garden with Kurenai walked by his side holding the basket that Sasuke had sent her earlier. He too told Kurenai about what had happened to him with his encounter with the Haruno woman. "Yes, and I assume she tried to the same to you?" Naruto asked as they sat down at the table and began to eat some of the meats and fruits. "Yeah," was all Sasuke said. "So my love, what of this mother-daughter duo? Do we need to be on guard or what?" Naruto said as he fed Ino a piece of watermelon. "Well, from what I know, Lily was once the wife of the previous lord of Fire Country until the rebellion. She managed to survive the raid to their manor, but her husband did not. She fled to Konoha, who took her and Sakura in. She got a job as a librarian, though she has tried to get the attention of some of the royal clans of Konoha, but they paid her no mind, though some only wanted to use her body. Sakura grew up a spoiled brat, being she was a princess of Fire Country, well at least in her mind she was," Ino explained. "But I don't think you have much to worry about. Sure, they will try, but I know that you would never stray." The rest of the lunch went without any talk of the mother-daughter duo. Instead they talked about what they were going to do after lunch. They decided that they were going to go riding in one of the flower fields. It was still early and Naruto was in his room getting ready for the banquet. He was dressed in the finest clothes metal had to offer, his crown neatly rested in his head. Ino had just walked into their bedchambers already dressed in her dress made for the finest silks from the east. Her head rested another crown signifying her status of a princess of metal. Her finest jewels in full display on her neck sparkled in the light. Her hair was also dressed in jewels from the conquered lands, they were placed by the princesses that once owned them. They walked side by side down the long royal hallway that led to the banquet hall, where the ball was to be held. As they neared they could hear the music already being played and the laughing guests. "Ready my love?" Naruto asked as he offered his hand. "Yes my beloved, let us enjoy this night." She bowed and accepted her husband's hand. As they walked towards the door the guards bowed to them. One of them signaled to the trumpeters to play. Presenting the crown Prince Naruto Namikaze and his wife Princess Ino Namikaze. The whole room erupted in cheer and applause as the couple walked to their table. As they sat down the wine was already being poured and different types of food was served. Sasuke and Kurenai soon arrived and was seated with Naruto and Ino. The King of Metal gave his speech saying how proud he was of his 2 grandsons. As the night progressed everyone was having a good time. Lily and Sakura tried several times to get a dance from the princes, but they were turned down every time. No one knew that they were being watched by a shadowy figure. Soon you will be mine, and I will make you pay for your infidelity, but no matter Kurenai, by this night's end, I will have you underneath me. Asuma thought as he watched from the window. 300 miles from the border of metal, a huge army marched towards it. Marching under the stone flag, the immortal enemy to metal, the kingdom of Mortar. A kingdom shrouded in mystery and darkness. Considered one of the Dark Kingdoms and part of the Deadly Alliance, Mortar brought unfathomable destruction and fear to all its enemies except for metal, and they despised them for it. The watchtower spots the first wave of Mortar soldiers coming over the hill. They immediately sent out the alarm notifying the troops to get ready. A messenger is sent out to inform the castle of the invaders. It will take him 3 days to reach the castle. The soldiers only hope to hold off the massive army until reinforcements can arrive. Back at the banquet, many of the guests had already retired for the night, saying that they needed their rest for the trip back home. Kurenai was standing in one of the many gardens getting some fresh air. Suddenly a shadowy figure landed behind her and grabbed her. "Hello, Kurenai-chan," the shadow said as he licked Kurenai on the neck. "Did you really think I would let you go so easily? You are mine to use as I please. I tried to give you a chance to become my wife, but now you are my little slut to use." Then the figure decided to grope one of her full S. Kurenai tried to break free from the figure, but noted that he was too strong. She hoped that her beloved came looking for her soon. She did not have to wait long as she heard the angry voice of her husband. "Unhand my wife," Sasuke yelled. He had went to look for his wife when he noticed that she was missing. He knew that she liked to walk in one of the garden at night. What he saw next infuriated him, his wife in the hands of another man being molested. "She is mine," Asuma yelled as he tightened his grip on Kurenai, making her gasp in pain. Sasuke heard his wife in distress charge at the man with his blade ready. But stopped when he saw a dagger at Kurenai's throat. "She is mine and mine alone. If I can't have her, no one can." Asuma yelled and was about to slice her throat, but fell to the ground lifeless. Naruto had heard the commotion and came to see what was going on. It was then that he saw Kurenai in the arms of another man. At first he thought that Kurenai was having an affair, but that was quickly squashed when Asuma said that she was his, and if he could not have her, then no one can. He knew he had to do something before his brother's wife was killed, so he quietly walked behind Asuma and stabbed him with a dagger. Kurenai quickly ran into the arms of her husband, who quickly looked over her and saw that her neck was slightly bruised. His anger was now at the boiling point. "I want all those from Konoha out of this castle now," he yelled at the guards who had just ran into the gardens. "Also, I want an investigation. I want to know how this man can sneak into the castle and take my wife hostage without being seen." Then he and Kurenai left the garden to tend to her injury. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Special JONIN23 for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.